Welcome to the fourth installment of our webinar series. My name is Tyler Scott. I'm a Client Success Manager here with Concept3D, and today we are going to be talking about data feeds, specifically looking at what is a data feed, what can possibly be done with a data feed, and what does it take to set up a data feed specifically. I do anticipate that we'll have some questions over the course of today. If you have a question, feel free to write that into the chat box, or at least hold on to it until our question and answer session. And if we don't get to your specific question today, or if another question comes up, feel free to reach out either directly to me at tyler.scott@concept3d.com, or you can also reach out to our support email at support@concept3d.com, and one of our team will be more than happy to get back to you as soon as they can. So as far as our conversation today goes, we're going to focus on three things specifically. First, what is a data feed? Secondly, what are the different types of data feeds? And third, how is a data feed set up? Once we get through all of that, like I said, we will have a Q&A session, so please do hold those questions until that time. So to start off with, let's talk about what is a data feed. So a data feed is taking information that's stored in another system or somewhere else, either that's within your own network or within another one of your provider's networks, and being able to move that into the interactive map and display it for users to be able to see and interact with. Typically, these feeds are associated with one specific thing on campus, whether that is bus routes or event calendars, as we'll get into here in just a little bit. It may be associated to a specific location, providing details about that location, or to a specific category. But since each data feed is unique in its own way, in some way, we always want to consider what do we want to really show? What's the end goal when it comes to this data feed? Down to nuances like how frequently are we going to refresh the data itself. We do have the option of doing a live feed, so having the data continuously refresh, versus a nightly feed, being able to refresh on a daily basis. And that all comes back to how is the data supposed to look, how is it supposed to react, and how is it supposed to be available to your users. Now let's talk about the different types of data feeds. So we have 5 currently. Our capacity feed, content feed, events feed, tracking feeds, and media feeds. And we'll start off with that capacity feed. Capacity feeds are going to measure how many people are using a specific area, or how many items are in use in a specific area as well. We have a couple of examples pulled up over here on the left of parking lots and computer labs. And in fact, I have the, there we are, computer lab for Penn State University pulled up as an example. For each of their computer labs, Penn State has some information that populates over here on the left, showing how many computers are available, what kind are they Mac or PC, to be able to give students a way to find resources when they need to as quickly as possible. So instead of having to walk around campus, particularly since Penn State has a very large campus, being able to see that and being able to say, oh, well, there is availability in the Ag Science building, and knowing they can go there and find a computer to be able to get their work done, or be able to get access to that technology when they need it. Oh, looks like my slides jumped a bit here. There we are. The next one down is our content feed. Content feed, much as the name implies, is about delivering descriptions, information, content, basically, to a location on the map. And typically this is done through the use of like an ArcGIS system or an Esri system, though we have worked with other systems as well. And the idea is to be able to provide additional information that you then don't have to go through and update in the CRM again. An example of this would be the University of Boulder. As you can see, UC Boulder has many of the rooms on campus highlighted. And when clicked on, we'll go ahead and just click on this one right here, the location details pop up, as well as lots of details about the room itself. Everything from how many people can be in it to how many power outlets are actually in this room. It gives a great level of detail that is all brought through a content feed. So all of this is being populated to say that, and populated from another system. And this way, if these rooms need to be updated, or if something changes in regards to any of these rooms, once it's updated in their system, it gets updated to our system without having to go into the CMS and make that update themselves. This can certainly be a very powerful way to give information to professors and students before they ever step into the classroom. Make sure that they are prepared for what their experience is going to be when they walk in. Our next one is the event feed. Now, small disclaimer, because of the lockdowns that are happening with campuses due to coronavirus, unfortunately, that also means events are not happening, which also means that our events feeds are working, but there's nothing to show right now. So I unfortunately don't have an example here, though I would recommend once the world opens back up, go take a look at the events feed for Miami University in Ohio. They do a great job. They have a lot of events. And the purpose of this feed is really to pull in that event information into the map and then display where that event is happening on the map. And so what will happen is that with an event feed, a pin will be dropped on the map to show where that event is happening. And all of the event's description, all of the information that's in the calendar system for it will get moved into and selectable into our system to be able to give people that information and see where on campus things are happening. Our next one is our tracking feed. So tracking feed, I would argue, is probably one of our most popular, if not our most popular feed, because of bus tracking. I have Boston University pulled up here. As you can see, they have 4 different routes that are outlined on their campus. These are all selectable to be able to turn them on and off to see where buses are running right now. Looks like it's just their weekday bus running right now, but this gives information like where are the various stops on campus and off campus? Where are the buses right now? And this is also a good example of one of our live feeds. So actually taking live data and displaying it on the map to give people more information about what's happening around them. Our last type of feed is the media feed. This is typically used to pull in camera data, live video, things like that, to be able to give that window into campus at any given time. This one I have an example pulled up from Michigan Tech. Michigan Tech, as you can see here, they have their cameras at multiple points around campus. I've selected the one here at Husky Plaza, and this is their actual live video feed. Obviously right now, not a whole lot going on. You may have noticed there was someone running through here just a second ago. Now you can kind of see the breeze playing in the trees back here, so proving that it is in fact a live data feed, but providing a way to give that window into what's happening on campus. So if I click on actually any of these others, we'll go ahead and click on Walker Lawn. You'll see moves over, opens up, and if we give it just a second while that feeds in, a live view of what's happening. There we go, car passing through, even better. So the media feed can be a great way to give that sense of being on campus without actually being on campus, or just in general if you have students who want to see, is an area busy? Is there a lot of things happening on campus, and where might those things be happening? All of that can be done with the use of these media feeds. Now, while these are the 5 feeds that I've outlined, that certainly doesn't mean that these are the only 5 feeds that we could look into doing. We are always excited to get to take on new challenges when it comes to data and finding new ways to be able to be creative and include data in our maps. So if there's something that stands out to you and you say, man, I'd really love to see this implementation, be able to see this functionality happen, we want to explore that with you. So please reach out to your client success manager to talk to them if you think of a different type of feed that may not be included on this. But that also leads to the question of what's needed when we're talking about setting up a data feed. And as I mentioned before, I think that it's best to start with the end in mind and start with the question of what do we want the end result to look like? How do we want people to be able to interact with this data? What data do we actually want to make sure is included? And is this something that needs to be done in real time or nightly, as well as is this something that needs to go through our development team, or would it be best to go through our feed embed tool? We'll cover the feed embed tool here in just a little bit, but it is a way to basically do it yourself when it comes to creating a feed into the map. The next question is, where is that data stored that we're going to be looking at pulling into the map, as well as how do we access it? Typically, as far as accessing goes, we're looking for access through something like an API. So some way that we can access the system, whether that is through your internal network on your campus or whether that is through a third-party vendor, where you can certainly work in both situations. And ideally, we're going to be looking for a sample of the data in a JSON format for us to be able to review, deconstruct, and say, okay, based upon the blueprint that we've been given of what do we want this feed to look like, here's the data now that we can mold and build into that blueprint. As a small aside on that too, please look at including your client success manager in those conversations as you're trying to get access to APIs and data samples. We work with quite a few different companies, people like Ride Systems, Passio, Transloc, Localist, in multiple different ways, particularly when it comes to data feeds. And a lot of times we can help facilitate those discussions in looking and finding data feeds, and looking and finding API access, as well as the JSON format data, as well as we can also bring in members of our development team to help answer any of your questions from within your own teams or within the teams of any other providers you may be looping in. Finally, after we have access to the data, our development team will take a look. They will establish what the level of effort looks like to build the feed that you're looking for, and then we will be able to provide a quote for that time and effort. Now, that is one way that we can go about creating a data feed. The other, as I mentioned previously, is the feed embed tool. Now, the feed embed tool is something that you have access to within the CMS, and it gives you a way to link from a URL into a location, and our location will pull in all of the HTML from that URL and use it to populate the description of that location. So as an example here, we're going to go back to University of Colorado. All of this is done with the feed embed tool. All of this room detail is coming through a URL that CU Boulder has set up. All of the styling is in the HTML, and so all our CMS is doing is we're pulling in all that information through the URL and displaying it into the location description box. This can certainly make it a lot simpler to establish a feed without having to go through the development process or add anything or go through too much scoping, basically, in that situation. But it doesn't have perhaps the same scope in that same way as being able to set up something like our transit feed or events feed. So it's a conversation that needs to be had as far as which is going to work best between the two. A few other things to keep in mind when using the feed embed tool. First and foremost, if you're using that URL that you're using has to be secure. So it has to be HTTPS. It can't just be HTTP. It also can't be password protected. So anything that you put on there will be publicly accessible content for us to be able to pull it through. And finally, any styling that you do to that HTML must actually be done in line with the HTML. It can't be done through a CSS style sheet to be able to give any sort of flair or anything like that to the actual description. But like I said, it can be done. It just has to be in line as opposed to in a CSS sheet. So to wrap up, first and foremost, what is a data feed? Data feed is when we take information from one source, we put it on the map for users to be able to interact with. What are the different types of data feeds? We have 5 currently. We have capacity feeds, like the computer lab feed from Penn State. We have content feeds, like the room details that we saw from CU Boulder. We have event feeds. Again, unfortunately, don't have an example right now, but go look at Miami University in Ohio. Once the world opens back up, for a great example there. We have tracking feeds, like we saw for Boston University with their transit system. And we have media feeds with the live cameras from Michigan Tech. And finally, how is the data feed set up? Well, we can do it in a couple of different ways. It can either go through our development team and we can take care of all the work on the back end there, or if it's something that can be done through the Feed Embed tool, it's something that you can set up for yourself through a little bit of do-it-yourself mentality. Thank you all for your time today. Greatly appreciate everyone who has carved out some time to be a part of this. And so at this point, going to go ahead, open up the floor for any and all questions.